Welcome to the Module 11 Concepts video, Using and Writing Visual Basic for Applications code. In this module, we're going to look at the different uses Visual Basic for Applications has in an Access database. If the idea of programming has you a little bit on edge, don't sweat it. In this module, we'll be doing some light programming, and I'll also show you some easy ways of doing some really cool things. Last week, we worked with macros to automate processes within a database. This week, we're going to be doing the same thing using Visual Basics for Applications, VBA for short. There are literally hundreds of programming languages out there. VBA is a specific programming language that comes with Access and all of the other Office programs. In Access, it has a wide range of uses. Personally, I love using VBA in Access because of this reason. With VBA, you can perform every action a macro can. You can also perform actions that a macro can't. For example, with VBA, you can automate sending emails, importing records from Excel spreadsheets, exporting records into formatted Excel spreadsheets, and so on. VBA is extremely flexible and functional. VBA is readable too. In other words, the syntax it uses is understandable. To open a report, use the Open Report function. When working with VBA, you'll be coding. This is the process of writing instructions in a programming language. These statements instruct Access what to do and when to do it. VBA instructions are also known as statements. When coding, you'll write out statements that will be carried out by Access. VBA itself is an event-driven language and an object-oriented language. What does this mean? Like macros, VBA and events are tied together. For example, when you click a button on a form, you can assign VBA code to that button's on-click event, opening a form, closing a form, or opening a report. With VBA, each set of instructions operates on objects within the database. Macros work in the same way. They are tied to events and operate on objects. However, VBA offers greater flexibility and error handling capabilities. VBA is written and contained in what are called procedures, of which there are two types. The first is the function procedure. A function procedure will perform operations and return a value. It can also accept an input value and be used with expressions. For example, you can create a function procedure that capitalizes a state abbreviation. On a forms before update event, the value in the state field will be sent to the function and returned in all capital letters. The second type is the subprocedure. This is the more common of the two and is tied directly to form and control events. An example of a subprocedure would be a buttons on click event that opens a report. On a larger scale, VBA is contained within modules in a database. And a module is a group of related procedures and functions that are stored together within the database. In Access, there are two types of modules. The first type is the standard module. A standard module is an actual database object that once created will be located in the navigation pane below macro objects. When you create a standard module, the correct Access naming convention to use is to prefix it, the module name, with BAS. BAS is short for basic, the type of programming language that VBA has its roots in. With a standard module, all of the functions and procedures within it are available to all of the objects within the database. If you were to create the capitalization function and place it in a standard module, any form that had a state field could use that function. Using standard modules is a great way of reusing code. Having the capitalization function in the standard module that can be used by multiple forms is much more efficient than placing that code into each of the forms individually. The second type of module is what's known as a class module. Class modules are the VBA that is associated with a particular form or report. For example, a form might have an onload event, a before update event, a function that applies to that form only, and several buttons that have on-click events. All of the codes for those subprocedures and functions will be contained in that form's class module. As such, these procedures and functions are only available to that form. They're referred to as local or private procedures. In the skills video, I'll cover the more in-depth material the module goes over. However, there are a few things the book doesn't cover or mention that I do expect where coding functions and procedures are concerned. This is more under the heading of coding practices than coding itself. Let's take a button on a form and its on-click event. Going back to previous modules, anytime you have a control that will be referenced in any way, whether as a calculated control or in this case VBA instructions, always give the control a meaningful name using access naming conventions. In this example, the button is named BTN Open Form. With buttons, you can use the prefix CMD for command button or BTN for button. The latter is more common naming convention used widely in other programming applications. Either way that you prefix it is fine. When writing code, always indent the code. It's much easier to read this way, especially when the code contains multiple statements and uses if or case structures. Another good practice is to include comments within the code, preferably above a set of related instructions. I comment my code like crazy, and the main reason being, if I have to come back and add or fix code months or even years later, the comments help me to understand quickly what that code is doing, and that saves a lot of time trying to figure out what it actually is up to. Finally, the best practice of all, and the book doesn't even mention this, but you should always include error handling within procedures or functions to handle unexpected issues. Error handling is very easy to write. The example here is exactly how it's done. At the top, include a single statement of on error, go to error handler. Error handler, the name, is arbitrary. I could have called it Fido the dog instead of error handler. At the bottom, the error handler portion will display a message box describing the error. After the user presses OK, it resumes another arbitrary name, begin here, which the resume sends it to the begin here action in the error handler, which simply closes the sub-procedure. Don't worry too much about trying to understand this if you don't. Just know that it works. After typing it into one procedure, you can then just copy and paste it into other procedures and functions you create, just removing the code that's in between it. You should always have error handling within any code. If you don't, what can happen is a debug message will come up if an error occurs, and the debug message allows a user to click a button that's called debug, and it will open the code to the user. A very bad thing to do. Never allow a user to access VBA code ever. They can do some real damage to a database if they can get to this code. That'll wrap up this concepts video. The module has quite a bit of hands-on material to cover, which I'll go over in the skills videos. Again, if you need to review any of the material here, use the rewind button.